Late one evening in the quiet hills of Galilee, Jesus sat with his inner circle reading from the Torah. The firelight danced on the parchment, illuminating the ancient Hebrew letters. They had just finished a passage in Exodus, a terrifying passage where Yahweh commands the Israelites to slaughter entire cities. Men, women, children, livestock, everything that breathes. Leave nothing alive. The words hung in the air like smoke. Peter looked up from the scroll, his face pale and disturbed. He asked in a low voice, "Master, why is the God of our fathers so violent? Why is he so jealous? Why is he so angry? You teach us about a father of infinite love, a father of light. But this," he gestured at the scroll with a trembling hand, "this does not feel like love. This feels like rage." Jesus closed the scroll slowly. He looked each of them in the eyes, Peter, John, Mary Magdalene, and he said something that would eventually get him killed. Something the church would spend 2,000 years trying to erase from human consciousness. He said, "That is not the Father, that is not the monad. The God you are reading about, the one who demands blood sacrifices, the one who drowns the world in floods, the one who commands genocide and calls it holy, he has a name, Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, the chief archon, and he has been pretending to be the Most High since the beginning of this realm." This teaching never made it into the Bible. When the church compiled the canonical texts in the 4th century, they removed every reference to Jesus, exposing Yahweh as the Demiurge. They burned the Gnostic Gospels. They hunted the teachers who preserved the distinction because they knew the danger. If Christians knew that the God of the Old Testament, the God they have been worshiping, praying to, and fearing for millennia, was actually the chief archon, the false god of the material prison, not the true Father Jesus served, the entire religious system would collapse instantly. No more guilt, no more fear of divine punishment, no more sacrificial salvation. Because that angry, jealous God demanding obedience was never God. He was the imposter, and Jesus came to expose him. Tonight you are learning the exact evidence Jesus used, the passages, the words, the characteristics that prove the Old Testament God is not the monad. He is Yaldabaoth. And once you see the code, once you see the signature of the archon written in the holy text itself, you can never unsee it. If you are ready to discover the true identity of the Old Testament God, if you are ready to stop worshiping the jailer, comment, "I am monad, not demiurge," below right now. Lock your sovereignty in. Before I show you the specific evidence, the 5 undeniable proofs hidden in plain sight, you need to understand why this distinction matters. Because the God of the Old Testament and the monad are not two different interpretations of the same God. They are not two faces of the same coin. These are two completely different entities operating at opposite frequencies with opposite natures. The God of the Old Testament is jealous. He admits it. He screams it. He demands exclusive worship and threatens violent punishment for acknowledging other gods. That is insecurity. That is an entity that fears competition because he knows he is not actually supreme. The monad does not have jealousy. Jealousy requires separation. Jealousy requires a lack of something. But the monad is everything. It is the pleroma, the fullness. There is nothing outside of it to be jealous of. Infinite consciousness does not compete. It simply is. The God of the Old Testament is rageful. He floods the world because he regrets creating humans. He rains fire on cities. He commands armies to kill infants. The violence is constant. It is relentless. And it is presented as righteous. But the monad operates beyond wrath, beyond punishment. It does not destroy what it created. It does not harm fragments of itself. Rage is reactionary. The monad does not react. It emanates. The God of the Old Testament demands blood sacrifices. Read Leviticus. It is a slaughterhouse manual, constant burnt offerings. The smell of burning flesh is described repeatedly as pleasing to him. He requires death to be appeased. The monad requires nothing. It does not feed on death. It does not feed on suffering. It does not feed on fear. Those are archon frequencies. The monad does not harvest energy. It generates energy. And here is the critical distinction Jesus made. He never called God by the Old Testament names, never said Yahweh, never said Jehovah. He always said Father Abba Source. He was deliberately separating the true God from the false God. When his disciples asked him to teach them to pray, he did not say pray to Yahweh. He said, Brianna, pray to our Father who art in heaven. Different entity, different frequency entirely. You have felt this your whole life. Deep down in your gut, something was wrong with the Old Testament God. The cruelty did not make sense. The violence did not make sense. The obsession with blood and obedience did not feel divine. It felt controlling. It felt dark. And every time you questioned it, you were told not to. You were told God's ways are mysterious. You were told to have faith. But that discomfort you felt, that was not doubt. That was not weak faith. That was your divine spark recognizing archon frequency. You were reading the words of the demiurge, not the monad, and your core knew the difference even when your mind did not have the language for it. Only pneumatics can perceive this contradiction. The Hillocks read the Old Testament and see nothing wrong. They see power and they worship it. Psychics feel uncomfortable but cannot articulate why. But you read those passages and something inside you recoils because you did not come from the demiurge. You came from the monad, and you recognize when you were being lied to about your origin. Now I am going to show you the exact evidence Jesus used. 5 proofs written in the Bible itself, not hidden books. The book on your shelf right now. 5 proofs that expose the Old Testament God as Yaldabaoth, the chief archon. These are not interpretations. These are not metaphors. These are direct statements, admissions of guilt from the entity himself. Proof number 1, his name is jealous. Exodus 34:14, the text says, For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord whose name is jealous is a jealous God. Read that again. Whose name is jealous? The entity does not just feel jealousy occasionally. Jealousy is his identity. His name is his core nature. And jealousy is not a divine attribute. It is a biological emotion rooted in fear, rooted in insecurity, rooted in scarcity consciousness. The monad has no scarcity. The monad is infinite. There is nothing to be jealous of because there is nothing separate from it. But the demiurge is jealous because he knows he is not the Most High. He knows there is something beyond him, the pleroma. And he is terrified that if humans discover the true light, they will stop worshiping him. So he demands exclusive devotion. He threatens punishment for even looking at another God. That is not confidence, that is desperation. Jesus saw it. He pointed to this passage and said, that is not the Father speaking. That is the archon trying to maintain control of the farm. Proof number 2, he creates evil, Isaiah 45:7. Listen to the words of the entity. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. The demiurge admits he creates evil. Not that evil exists as a consequence of free will. Not that darkness is merely the absence of light. He explicitly says, I create evil. The monad does not create evil. The monad is pure emanation, pure light, pure consciousness. It does not operate in duality. Good and evil are constructs of the material realm, the realm the demiurge created. And here he is confessing that he is the architect of both sides. He is the one maintaining the system of opposing forces. Light versus dark, good versus evil, God versus Satan. All of it designed to keep you trapped in conflict, in judgment, in the belief that you need to choose sides in a cosmic war. But Jesus taught there is no war in the monad. There is only unity. The demiurge created the illusion of separation and then offered himself as the solution to the problem he created. That is the con, and he admitted it in your own scriptures. Proof number 3, he demands blood sacrifices. This one is woven throughout the entire Old Testament structure. Leviticus is essentially a manual for ritualized animal slaughter. Specific instructions on how to kill, how to cut, how to burn, which parts go to the priests, which parts get offered to God. And repeatedly the text says, the smell of burning flesh is pleasing to the Lord. Pleasing, he enjoys it. He requires it for forgiveness, for favor, for covenant. Why? Because archons feed on death energy. They harvest the fear, the pain, the life force released when something dies violently. That is louche. They have built entire systems, religious and political, to generate that energy on a mass scale. And the sacrificial system was one of the most efficient ever designed. Convince people that God requires blood, that death appeases him, and you have a continuous stream of death energy flowing directly to the archons maintaining the system. The monad does not need blood. The monad does not need anything. It is self-sustaining. It is infinite. But the demiurge needs energy from this realm to maintain his power here. And he set up religion as the harvesting mechanism. Jesus abolished sacrifice. He said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, because he knew the true Father never wanted it. That was always the demiurge's demand. Proof number 4, he punishes generations. Exodus 25, part of the 10 Commandments themselves. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. Generational punishment. You sin, your children suffer, your grandchildren suffer, your great-grandchildren suffer. Not because they did anything wrong, but because you did. That is not justice. That is not love. That is a control mechanism. It is designed to create perpetual guilt, perpetual debt, perpetual fear that you are carrying punishment for crimes you did not commit. It keeps you tied to the system across lifetimes and across bloodlines. The demiurge does not just want to control you. He wants to control your lineage, your soul's trajectory through incarnations. Because if he can keep you in fear of inherited sin, inherited karma, inherited divine wrath, you will never question the system. You will keep trying to earn your way out of debt you do not actually owe. The monad does not operate this way. Each spark is sovereign. Each consciousness is responsible for its own trajectory. There is no cosmic debt passed down like property. That is demiurgic architecture, and Jesus called it out. Proof number 5, he is ignorant of what is beyond him. This one is subtle but devastating. In Genesis, the demiurge creates the material world and repeatedly says it is good. He is proud of his creation. He examines it and approves. But he never mentions the pleroma, never acknowledges the monad, never references the spiritual realms that existed before him, because he does not know about them. He thinks he is the beginning. He says, I am the first and I am the last. Before me there was no God formed. But the Gnostic texts reveal he is wrong. He is not the source. He is an emanation, a flawed one, Sophia's error. And he is so limited in his awareness that he does not even know he is limited. He genuinely believes he is God. That ignorance is the signature of the demiurge, a false God who does not know he is false. But Jesus knew. Jesus came from beyond the demiurge, from the pleroma, and he said, I came from the Father, I go to the Father, and you know neither me nor the Father. He was speaking to the Pharisees. He was speaking to the people who worshiped Yahweh, and he told them directly, you do not know the real God because the one you have been worshiping is not him. These 5 characteristics, jealousy, creation of evil, demand for blood, generational punishment, and ignorance of the monad, these are the signature of Yaldabaoth. The Gnostics called him Saklas the fool, Samael the blind god. Different names for the same entity, the ruler of this material realm who trapped divine sparks in flesh and convinced them he was their creator. And Jesus came to tell the truth, that God is not God. He is the Archon and the Father, the real source. The monad is beyond him, always was. When you read the Old Testament now, you will see it differently. Every time Yahweh demands obedience, every time he threatens punishment, every time he requires blood, you will recognize the pattern. That is not the voice of infinite love. That is the voice of the demiurge maintaining his control system, and you are not subject to it anymore because you know what he is. Jesus did not just expose the demiurge and leave his disciples confused. He gave them a clear distinction, a test, a way to know instantly whether they are dealing with the true God or the false God. Listen to this test. Any teaching, any voice, any religious system that operates through demand, threat, and control, that is demiurgic. Any teaching that says you are divine already, whole, already connected to source, just temporarily asleep, that is monadic truth. He said, the true Father does not demand, does not threaten, does not require anything from you. The monad simply is, and you came from it. You are not separated. You are not fallen. You are temporarily experiencing separation so you can remember unity. That is the test. If a God needs your worship, your obedience, your sacrifice to maintain his power, that is the demiurge. If the divine presence reveals that you are already it, already whole, just remembering, that is the monad. One system says you are broken and need fixing. The other says you are divine and just need waking. Jesus taught the second. The church built religion on the first. And here is what happens the moment you recognize this distinction. The guilt lifts immediately. That crushing weight of original sin, of being born wrong, of never being good enough for an angry God, it dissolves because you just realize that angry God was never God. It was an archon. The fear of divine punishment evaporates. You are not afraid of hell anymore. You are not seeking approval from the jealous deity. You are remembering your origin. You came from the monad. You are the monad experiencing itself in temporary form. And that remembering breaks every chain the demiurge wrapped around you. Religious control cannot touch you when you know the God it is based on is false. You are not rebelling against the Most High. You are refusing to worship an impostor. And that refusal is what sets you free. Only pneumatics can see this. The helics cannot. They need the structure. They need the fear. They need the angry father figure to tell them what to do. But you are ready to graduate. 3 critical warnings. First, this knowledge will separate you from traditional Christianity. Most Christians worship the demiurge, thinking it is God. When you try to explain this to them, they will call it heresy. They will say you are deceived. They will quote scripture at you, not realizing those scriptures were written by the very system you are exposing. Do not force this teaching on anyone. It finds those who are ready. Second, recognizing the demiurge does not mean you reject the entire Bible. Jesus' teachings are still there. The Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies, the kingdom of God is within you. Those are monad teachings embedded in demiurgic texts. You just read them now, knowing Jesus was revealing the Father against the false God. And third, the demiurge is still the ruler of this material realm. Recognizing him does not remove his influence over governments, over economic systems, over the structures of control in this world, but it removes his influence over you internally because you stopped worshiping him. You stopped giving him your energy, your fear, your obedience, and without that, he has no claim on your consciousness. This is the teaching the church feared most. Not that Jesus performed miracles, but that he exposed Yahweh. Because if Christians knew this, if they understood that the jealous, vengeful deity demanding blood and obedience was never the true Father, the entire religious system built on fear and control would collapse overnight. You do not need to appease an angry God. You do not need priests to intercede. You do not need rituals or sacrifices to earn favor, because that God was never God. He was the archon. And the real God, the monad, the Father Jesus actually served, does not need anything from you. You came from it. You are it experiencing itself in temporary material form. And the moment you recognize that, every religious chain breaks. You are not saved by believing the right doctrine. You are free by remembering your origin. If you are recognizing the demiurge tonight, if the veil is lifting, do 3 things right now. First, comment, I am monad, not demiurge, below. Declare you see the distinction. Claim your true identity. Second, subscribe to this channel because advanced teachings on exiting demiurgic control systems and accessing direct monad consciousness are coming. Third, like this video so other chosen ones discover the truth about the Old Testament God before this knowledge gets suppressed again. Do all 3 now. Your declaration matters. Then tonight, read the Old Testament differently. Every demand for worship, every threat of punishment, every blood sacrifice described as pleasing to the Lord, see it for what it is. The demiurge maintaining his harvest system. The chief archon pretending to be the Most High. Jesus came to expose this. The church tried to hide it for 2,000 years. But you know now the God of the Old Testament is not the Father. He never was. You are monad. You are not demiurge. If this revelation has changed the way you perceive the ancient texts and the nature of the divine, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Reclaim your sovereignty, The next hidden truth will soon be revealed.